Today is Youth Sunday, and you don't need me to tell you, American youth are in something of a crisis. According to the Youth Mental Health Project, by the time children are the age of 17, 13.6% of boys and around 36% of girls have been or are depressed. Then, according to a 2017 study by the American College Health Association, by the time these kids get to college, 40% suffer from depression and 61% from anxiety. An alarming number of these kids then turn in desperation to alcohol or illicit drugs to self-medicate. The Department of Health and Human Services reports that depressed kids are twice as likely to start using alcohol or an illicit drug. And then to top it all off, according to the Center for Disease Control, suicide is now the second leading cause of death of children ages 10 to 24. Nearly 8 years ago, when I was interviewing to be the confirmation teacher here, I asked the associate at the time, Ann Richards, who's much beloved to many of you, what she wanted me to do with the kids in confirmation class. She said, "I want for you to convert them from the ways of the world to the ways of life in Jesus Christ. Because if you don't, the ways of the world will kill them." Indeed, she was right. I want to admit right away, I don't have all the answers. And I think that anyone who tries to tell you there's only one cause of the crisis we all know is there, and which many of us experience in our homes, families, or in our bodies, anybody who says there's only one cause for that thing is probably trying to sell you something. And I don't want to do that this morning. I don't have all the answers. Also, I can't speak to you as a parent because I'm not one. I can speak to you only as an educator and as a priest and as someone who loves you and who loves your kids. But in that capacity, I do have one or two thoughts about what it takes nowadays to convert from the ways of the world to the ways of life in Jesus Christ. The first thing I want to say is this: the stigma still present, even in highly educated communities like ours, the stigma around mental health disorders and their treatment is a moral evil. Period. Too often are things like talk therapy or psychiatric medication or even belonging to an AA group considered signs of failure and weakness. And this has an awful effect on the lives of our kids. It suggests that somehow those who need mental health treatment are less mentally tough than the rest of us. They are not. If someone told a person undergoing chemo that they got cancer because they had a weak constitution and that their chemo is just further evidence of how wimpy their bodies are, we would think that person was outlandishly stupid. And we ought to think the same of anyone who says the same about mental illness, period. Let me just say, this priest has gone to therapy because no less than my bishop told me to do so. And it changed my life. And I want to say very clearly that if any of you here this morning, a kid or an adult, think that you are struggling with some form of mental illness, an anxiety that you cannot shake, a depression you can't seem to get rid of, there is help. Okay? You do not have to feel this way. And by God's grace, you will not feel this way forever. There are people who can help you. And I hope that you will speak with someone in your life whom you trust. Or with me, or Father Peter, or Reverend Elizabeth, if you need help. When Jesus asks you, child, you don't have any fish, do you? It takes courage to say, no, I don't. And I am so proud of those of you who I know have answered our Lord honestly. The second thing I want to say is that when people ask me about my nearly 8 years experience at this point, it's hard to believe, 8 years experience teaching 8th graders in New Canaan, Connecticut, this is what I tell them. I have spent my entire life in education, being educated and then trying to teach others, but fits a start. I spent my last decade in higher education, in public schools and private. And I have to say, the 8th graders in this town are more stressed out than I was at any time in my young adulthood, except maybe when I was applying for the doctoral program at Yale. That is sick. And our way of life needs to change. In what I thought was a brilliant editorial in the Wall Street Journal about a month and a half ago, Peggy Noonan said that the American upper classes have poured their hopes and dreams into a new form of parenting, the cultivation of what she provocatively termed success robots. Privately tutored, eloquent, accomplished, credentialed, skinny success robots. To this, I just want to be sure to add, and I wish that Ms. Noonan had made a bit more of this. It's not just the parents, okay? It's not just parents. It's schools and friends and counselors and the test prep culture and the admissions departments and the whole culture. It's us, okay? It's all of us. It's me. It's us and the sick perversion of the American dream that hangs over those of us who live in places like New Canaan, like the rain cloud that occasionally plagued Charlie Brown. The idea that our successes define who we are, or if not our successors, our failures. Now, I'm not saying we don't want our kids or ourselves to strive for excellence. Quite to the contrary. I'm saying that there are better ways of doing so than the ordinary routes we have set up for them. 4.0s and 36s and 1600s and 3 strikes you're out and 3 under pars, followed by W2s with as many zeros as possible. Real excellence involves making mistakes and learning from them. And we live in a world that cannot countenance anyone making any of them. In my decade of being in higher education as a student, the most liberating moment was when I heard my medieval theology professor, Dennis Turner, who was from the UK. He'd come to Yale from Cambridge, so he wasn't exactly an academic slouch, okay? He'd come from the UK, and he stood in front of our medieval theology class. We were first and second year divinity school students. And he told us just how ridiculous he found American grade obsession. He told us basically that we were all so obsessed with getting A's that we turned into sycophantic little suck-ups who just wrote down whatever we thought our professors wanted to hear. He was right. It's exactly how I got through undergrad. I thought, I know this professor's political orientation. I know this professor's philosophical orientation. I'll give them what they want. And we also avoided taking any argumentative risks at any cost, because we knew we couldn't fail. No wonder, he mused, that all our papers were so dull and our theology so dumb. He was right. He encouraged us instead to just try an idea out. Just try it. It is God, after all. Just try an idea. Write the paper, and if you get to the last paragraph and you're like, well, that really didn't work, did it? Write that in the paper. Take a risk. It would be just fine if it didn't work. Less than perfect marks weren't the end of the world. And we had learned something in the process. We need more of that across the board of our lives. I want to speak at this point directly to the youth of our congregation, many of whom very happily are seated behind me today. I want for you guys to hear this. You are good enough because God made you good enough. And I am in awe of you on a regular basis. I am in awe of the vividness and the strength of your hopes and your dreams for your lives and for our world. You are joyful when the rest of this world is cynical. And I am in awe of the energy and determination with which you pursue all those dreams. You all work hard. And you play hard too. And if you are in over your head, I beg you, don't go it alone. You don't have to. There are people who can help you. People whom I believe God will put in your life to do so. Your successes are amazing, and we all love celebrating them with you. Your amazing games, your school admissions, your concerts, and your plays. But those things aren't who you are. They're not. They're awesome, but they're not you. And neither are your failures. Whatever they have been, or whatever they will be. To paraphrase Thomas Aquinas, y'all know I'm a nerd. I can't help it. To paraphrase Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval scholastic, the things we love tell us who we are. If you want to know who you are, ask yourself what you love. And if I had one bit of advice to you, one bit of advice to give you, especially those of you who are about to graduate, it'd be this. Be like the Apostle Peter and love Jesus as hard as you can. There are times in life when we all feel as Peter and the other disciples do in our gospel this morning, when the nets of our life are coming up empty. When they do, be honest with Jesus. Tell him when your life is awesome, and tell him when it sucks. He will give you the courage to put down your net on the other side of the boat. He will never leave you, and he will never, ever, ever stop loving you. Amen.